Welcome to the Push Ventures podcast, Push Your Advantage, and thanks a lot for tuning in. This is an installment of our Push Your Partner series of interviews. In our interview series, we are discussing various topics with different contributors to the African tech ecosystem. And our guest today is Mutethia Mbaabu, or better known as Tesh, who was the co-founder and CEO of MarketForce, and he led the business expansion of that company across 5 markets in sub-Saharan Africa, with over 270,000 merchants and 100 consumer brands trading on the platform. He recently co-founded and heads Chpter, an AI-powered conversational commerce platform that enables businesses to sell more on social media platforms like WhatsApp and Instagram by automating conversations, marketing, and payments all in one place. He's a graduate of computer science from the University of Nairobi, and together we'll speak about MarketForce and the new and next chapter. We'll discuss the early days, the growth and expansion of MarketForce, then the struggles, downsizing, and finally closing the door on MarketForce, as well as the next chapter. So Tesh, thank you a lot for coming and being here with me today. And are you ready to be pushed?
Super ready. Thanks for having me, Ben.
Wonderful. So let's get started with the early days. Tesh, I know a lot about your early days already because we've met quite early, 5 years ago, I think it was. But for those who don't know you, maybe tell us, how did your interest in entrepreneurship first pick up? Because I know as well there's been more than MarketForce before.
Yeah, absolutely. I started my entrepreneurship journey right after high school. But I think the seed was planted much earlier because my mom was an entrepreneur. And I got the opportunity to visit her business, her workplace, multiple times and just see her manage her team, grow the business, the ups and downs. And I think that's where I sort of subconsciously understood that you don't have to, get a job, be employed. There's this thing called running your own business. And so after...
What business was she running?
She was running a law firm. So she ran a law firm. She had, I think, 3 or 4 employees. And you could, later I started to understand the struggles and the successes that she was going through because I could see her during the different phases. And I mean, your family does feel the impact when you're an entrepreneur because of the long hours, of the sort of different hours. It's not sort of 8 to 5, So I could tell that, and I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So the question was, in what field?
You didn't like public holidays, right?
100%. I think I've always been super driven just to be, I like doing stuff, waiting and,
So there's a question that I kind of know the answer to already, but I have it for you because I think it's important for a lot of the viewers and listeners out there. And that is, how did you go about learning some of the skills in particular that you lacked, which you needed in order to build a tech business?
Yeah, so I knew that to build a tech business, I needed to understand software engineering. I was lucky enough to be accepted to study computer science at the University of Nairobi because that gave me a really, really solid foundation for the principles of computer engineering, computer science. So that was good. But mostly before that, I self-taught a lot. So I got a laptop right before joining campus. And I'd use YouTube and online resources just to learn graphic design, start learning the principles of like web design. And I started looking for gigs. And so I think I learned a lot by just doing.
Yeah. Okay, so you were like on something like Fiverr and then were just doing small gigs in order to build your skill set?
So I was hawking my services. So literally I'd be in church, and after the service I'd ask for introductions to my friends' parents and all, and tell them I can build your website, So I was just resourceful in that sense, and I've had that sense of the sales part because a lot of the big challenge with most techies or engineers is they know how to build cool stuff, but they don't know how to sell it.
Yeah.
So I had that instinct of I want to get a customer and build with them or build for them. It's not just building cool stuff for the sake of building cool stuff.
Did you at that time when you were pricing your own product, like your own service,
Yes.
did you think about the trade-off between, like, for example, pricing too expensive or pricing cheaper, just so that you get that experience? So like give early discounts when you're just about starting to build your skill set, when you know you're actually not really that good, but you just watch one YouTube video.
Yeah, that's an important point, because even today, I think I'm a big believer of demonstrating value over trying to engineer pricing. And and this is something that young people make big mistake doing. One of my brothers, my youngest brother, he's in first year in university, and he's volunteering at a friend's company, a friend's business, and he wants to be an entrepreneur, but he was like, I just want to learn, I'll do it for free. And I told him, like, you'll be much more successful 2 years down the line when you're building your stuff, because you already have experience under your belt. So I think initially it's very important to value experience, value learning over the pricing, because why should I trust you and give you my dollars if you don't have any experience,
Yeah, true. Good point.
Yeah.
Now, one other question is, how did you go about meeting your co-founders? Because I know when you started MarketForce in particular, it wasn't just you.
Yeah, so I'm very lucky, because I still get the question of how do I get my co-founder today. So it's something a lot of people struggle with. I was lucky because I was in class, first year of Compass, with the person who's ended up becoming my co-founder, and this is the 13th year working together. So that's privilege that, that co-founding relationship morphed into a deeper friendship that's lasted for so long and over multiple businesses. But it was just because we had complementary skills initially, and we shared a vision of building something. So my co-founder, I missed a lot of classes because I was out there hustling. I tried to get gigs. And he would attend classes, and he was very curious why I would miss classes. So one day he asked me, we're from very different backgrounds, but he was just curious, like, dude, what's more important than school? Why do you miss classes all the time? He's also a very gifted engineer. I went for lunch and I told him about this side business that I run in graphic and web design. And he was like, dude, I would also do with some extra money. So in case you have work that you can do, let me know. And we started working together like that, and decided to incorporate a business together. Software business, our first software business. So that's sort of how we met.
Okay, that's a great story.
Yeah.
So school is the place to be.
Yeah, I think school is great for networks. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And when you then started building MarketForce, how did that start? I know there was a company called Mesozi. Can you just briefly walk us through how you ended up getting to MarketForce?
Yeah, so this software company I'm talking about is Mesozi, actually. And the idea was, we don't know exactly what products that we want to build that will make an impact. But what we know is we have skills that we can sell to anyone looking to build software. So the idea was translate this consulting idea for graphic and web design into software. I meet Ben, he's running a business. How can I make your business better? So we'd build software for you, or implement software for you that exists, open source software. And quickly we started getting the same request for this similar application from multiple businesses. That's how MarketForce was born. A lot of businesses, when it comes to distributing goods and financial services, how our market works, the African dynamic is, you have these salespeople who will go and sell, whether it's insurance or banking or FMCG products. Is the guy who will visit the shops and collect the orders. So all of them are like, these orders we collect on pen and paper. We'd like to digitize how we collect orders. So that's how MarketForce was born. It was initially an app that enabled any company with sales agents, field sales agents, to digitize how that process works. And then quickly, morphed into something different, but that was the genesis.
the morphing is a good point in the sense of the funding. How did the morphing where did the first funding come from, which then started to morph Mizozi into MarketForce?
Yeah. So initially, I think one thing that's not emphasized in our journey is the fact that we bootstrapped for quite a while. So I remember even when I met you, like we didn't have external funding, but we had a business with, I think it was 15, 20 employees at the time. And it was all like revenues from customers. So the first version of MarketForce had customers who found a lot of value and were willing to pay for it. So we were funded in that case. And we were looking for money to expand that business as well as launch this new product idea that is Reja. And the first funding came through applying for so many like accelerators, incubators. We were just in the mind space of we need capital injection to grow. Because it's easy to think that, okay, these guys just raised funding, they were lucky and they were able to do this thing and it didn't work. All that story, but the reality is we actually had a business that was profitable, that made sense. But the reason we went out for capital injection is because we had very big dreams and we wanted to build a Pan-African business and we knew we needed capital injection to do that. Our first checks came from family and friends. They weren't that significant, but they were significant because they gave external people, strangers, the confidence that we had people who believed in us. So it was about $100,000 in initial like friends, family, acquaintances. And then that propelled the next 100K from strangers you might actually know. And then subsequently, that gave confidence to an American investor, which is YC. In the application, it was like, okay, have you raised any money? Like, yes, we've raised about 200K from friends, family, and stuff. And then I think because they're not in the market, so what they believe at that point, I guess I would do the same thing is, okay, if this thing is validated enough for people to invest in these young guys, then we should probably back it. So, and then the rest is history. Once YC came in, a lot of more funds follow, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. That's how money works.
It's also a good statement in general. It is what it is. but you were right. Like that bootstrapping was very important because I remember like when we met at that time, like you said, you had just got like a bit of funding to friends and family. You had a product which you didn't even know exactly what it can morph into. Yeah. You just knew that was something that you were onto and you wanted to look for that next step.
Yeah.
And then again, like you're saying, those incubators, they probably give you also some more exposure.
Yeah.
So I think what I'd like to know from you as well is what do you feel about like the upside and downside of an incubator? Okay. And did it come at the right time? Or would you, if you were to do it again, would you maybe say, let me work a bit more and then go to the incubator?
Yes. Yeah, makes sense. I think what I think about incubators in general is you need to know what you don't know and appreciate what you don't know. So when you're applying for any incubator accelerator, have a very clear idea of why you're doing it. I see companies in their third, fourth, fifth year still going into accelerators, and everyone is trying to, like, a lot of corporates are launching accelerators left, right, center. So you might see a startup in like 5 accelerators, and I've seen this being talked about recently. Is why is that happening? Why is a 4-year-old company going to an accelerator? They should leave those chances to other companies. But I think our ecosystem is still not mature enough that corporates just end up starting incubators and accelerators instead of thinking through the life cycle of startups and thinking, okay, we need to have an accelerator, we need to have a venture fund, we need to have, an M&A sort of vehicle to be able to buy into innovation at different stages. So the only path for me to, for example, work with a Safaricom is go through the journey. Even if I'm a 4 or 5 year old company, I need to go through the journey with them. That starts at accelerator or pre-accelerator. Even if my company is mature, I can't just go to them directly and have an M&A conversation, right? So I think that's just something we need to appreciate about the ecosystem. And as a founder, be deliberate about which accelerators you choose to join, because at the end it takes that village. It takes the right partners to make a product work. It takes the right distribution, and that's what I think these things provide.
Yeah, you're right. All the different players in the ecosystem have to play their part, and I have to do so.
Yeah,
I have to do so well, actually.
Yeah,
What you're basically saying is, that M&A activity. It's important. Why? Because you shouldn't have to go through an incubator in order to get recognition or in order to, partner with bigger organizations.
Yes.
That's unfortunately the situation right now, at least judging by what you said.
Mostly, yeah. Right, yeah.
And it's something where the corporates have to start thinking different as well.
Yeah.
Because that is where, in order to create a truly thriving ecosystem, that is some of the activity that we need.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So now let's stick with kind of YCombinator, because that was, like you said, it was that I would call it the launch of the next phase, right?
Yeah.
The launch of that growth and expansion phase.
Yes.
So that we can mark as the point at which MarketForce started truly growing. And when it started, how, from your experience, how kind of life-changing was YCombinator? And did you ever feel that, some of the people who maybe came in or came just after that, they were focusing too much on wanting you to expand too quickly? As in, did you feel comfortable with it? Did you feel sometimes overly challenged?
Yeah.
And if maybe one addition to that question, if someone wants to start a business now and is wanting to go through Y-Combinator, because I think they'll be right for the business, what do you feel they should be aware about, like you're saying, the clarity of purpose?
Yeah, so it's a loaded question.
Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, I think Y-Combinator was a really good launch into our next phase of growth, because it enabled us to launch this product. It enabled us to dare to be bold, because the idea needed capital. And this is the first time we actually stopped bootstrapping. By bootstrapping, I mean like doing gigs that weren't even tied to the MarketForce product, because you just need to survive. And that survival mentality is very tricky. It's very dangerous. Unfortunately, a lot of us are founders in this ecosystem. I think one of the reasons we're really struggling to take off as an ecosystem, even especially the Kenyan or East African ecosystem, is because there's hardly any angel checks. So what happens is you have to do your day hustle, and your startup is your side hustle. Or you're doing a startup as your main hustle, and you have a side hustle just to support it, to pay the bills. Whereas if you look at the Western markets, where you can get angel investment, friends, family, or even seed funding of 500K just to focus on building something without having all the struggle of the side hustles. So Y-Combinator gave us that. It was more like, okay, here's $150,000, and then you top up what we've already raised. You have $350K to really focus, wake up every day thinking about how you solve this problem and iterate. And I think that's why Reja really took off. And it also inspired confidence of the local ecosystem, the local VC dollars to come into the business, which was good. Funny enough, I think it should be the other way around, right? Like, it should be a local VC. There's a lot of founders I know who've gotten commitments from American VCs, European VCs, but the thing they're told is get a local VC to invest in you, and then we'll follow. Like, that shouldn't be the case, So there's, again, a bit of immaturity there that I hope we can keep addressing. as we move along. But I feel like that's a role that local VCs should really try and fill. Like be comfortable being that fast check into those founders. Be comfortable with knowing that, or giving them the confidence to stop everything else and spend majority of the time trying to build this thing. That's the only way we'll produce impactful businesses in my view.
Okay. Now, you were expanding to 5 countries, right?
Yeah. So you asked a question about the expansion, like if it was investor-led. So we started in Kenya. So it's a combination of 2 things. We did have very bold, big dreams. And I guess that's why guys backed what we were doing. We've never thought about ourselves as a small local player. So just selling this big vision, how big this can get, is very critical. Then the investors that came in fueled sort of our psyche, we call it that, to grow into different. So I'll give a Nigeria an example. We have a VC who offered a certain amount of money and sort of on condition that we expand into Nigeria, because they're like, the problem you're solving in Kenya, we should do this in Nigeria. Nigeria is even a bigger market. And they were right. Like, Nigeria worked really well for us. It was highly competed. We probably expanded too early. And in hindsight, this is some of the lessons you learn, especially as a second or third time founder. And tying back to, we're not telling, this is a conversation we had a bit earlier. We're not telling the stories we should be telling as experienced founders. I'm happy to be here to share so that other founders don't make the same mistakes. But I can tell you, when I was building, in my first year of building MarketForce, there was hardly any experienced founder to talk to. Not because they hadn't done it, they hadn't made mistakes, but they were just not willing to share their stories. So we end up paying school fees that we shouldn't be paying, Yeah. So we need to change that, and that's why I like this podcast.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's what we want to do here as well. I think it will be great, for those who are coming next, not to make those mistakes that you're kind of saying, like, focus a bit more on really on how you're doing, what you're doing, and then expanding, and not just because of somebody saying, but knowing exactly the clarity of purpose. And I think that's an important point.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the next question. In terms of expansion, I was wondering as well, because you're saying you were expanding quite quickly because you had those big dreams.
Yeah.
How did you measure successful expansion? Did you have that clarity of purpose at that moment? Yeah. And if you were to have to do it again, if you were back then now, knowing what you know right now, what would you do differently?
Great question. I've reflected on this a lot, obviously. I think we did many things well, man. And that's why MarketForce got to where it is. But let me start with what we did really well. I think we assembled a fantastic team. So I would measure success based on the quality of talent that we were able to bring in. So we had a structure that was highly localized. The country manager in Nigeria was Nigerian, in Uganda was Ugandan, Rwanda was Rwandese. So that was important. They understand the local dynamics, and that's why even within those markets, we were able to launch and grow as if we were companies from those markets. In fact, to the surprise of many other founders, like how do you do this? So it's just the power of the team. And you fix the team and they fix a lot of stuff. They'll build great product. They'll figure out the product market fit to some extent. So your work is just to really inspire and build a structure that can scale, which we did quite well. I think what we would have done better is look at our fundamentals, the unit economics differently. This is, it's really a tough one, because when you're venturing, you're innovating even on the business model. You're doing something that's not been done before. So it's like a sorry, not sorry situation. Like, that's what venture is about. Yeah. But when you scale a business with fundamentals that are not solid, then you bleed a lot. So we were bleeding a lot. If we hadn't scaled as fast, we probably would have had more runway to try and figure things out. But again, if you look at the reason we're scaling, all businesses in our segment were acting as if it's a land grab kind of thing. But in hindsight, it's not. It wasn't like a winner-take-all situation. We would have been more patient with our expansion.
Yeah, so like the unit economics, if they had been there, you would have just been a bit more stable.
Yes.
In order to, press forward and then, like you're saying, expand a bit more gradually, right?
Gradually, exactly. And if it doesn't work while you're small, then you're able to, tweak the whole thing all together. If you want to shut it down, for example, you can even return the capital to the investors. There could be different ways would have done it with the runway. Yeah.
Now, when you're saying tweak as well, because how many countries did you operate in at the peak? Five. So which countries were those again?
Kenya, Nigeria, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda.
So 5 countries, which are all different countries as well.
Yeah.
Was there a lot of tweaking or localization that you had to do? In particular, also when it comes to the strategy for expansion. I mean, you mentioned already you were trying to find local people, great people, but from the product end as well.
Yeah.
Is that something that you had to do and that you might not have been as aware about in the beginning when you kind of pressed into these markets?
Not so much. So the market, especially in our segment, operate pretty much the same way. Very fragmented. You're working in manufacturer, then distributor, wholesaler. So the markets feel the same.
Yeah.
So it's highly relational in terms of, because it's a marketplace. On the side of acquiring manufacturers, distributors, it's about relationships and getting those products onto your platform. On the merchant side, the neighborhood merchant, the Duka, is pretty much the same. Their behavior is the same. So the localization we had to do on the product was more like language and payment methods, for example. Nothing much. Yeah.
And in total, can you disclose how much funding MarketForce raised?
Yeah, we raised 42.5 million. So about half of that was debt. And how this kind of debt works, warehouse debt, is as you bring in equity into the business, or as you need the debt, then you access it. It was warehouse debt, pretty much. But yeah, then eventually we got $14 million out of the equity. Some of the money was not funded. Yeah,
which is a good, I would say, transition to our next chapter that we're talking about. Not the next chapter yet as a topic, but the struggles, the downsizing, and finally closing the door on MarketForce, right?
Yeah.
Because when the first cracks started to appear, one of those must have also been not getting all the funding. Yeah. And from your perspective, how would you describe it? Was there a small fire that started to spread slowly? And when did it actually start to just become like this huge wildfire? How was that from your perception with all those cracks and the struggles? When did they really start? And maybe I think it'll also be good for our listeners to understand if you can let us in to the mind of Tesh in that moment. How were you thinking, as in, like, how difficult was it to actually keep thinking straight types?
Yeah, it's a very hard period. What I would say happened was we were a bit naive in the sense that we over-trusted that this money that has been signed for committed is going to be wired. And, when that didn't happen, we took too long to adjust the business with this new funding reality. So we'd have cut the operational costs, the teams much earlier. And we were operating as if we have the 20 million equity like in the bank, get the money in the bank quicker, and if not, just cut early. So this meant we really bled, and it was too late for us to adjust the ship. It's a big ship, so trying to change the course of a ship. We had, unfortunately, a lot of pressure from investors, shareholders around becoming profitable much faster than we had planned. And this is not a MarketForce thing, this is an ecosystems thing, which is quite sad because there was this push for grow. And then all of a sudden it's like adjust to the new reality, become profitable. So if your business wasn't set up to do that, and I like to give the example of Uber and Amazon, they're in the West, but we had built a model like that, which is, again, I guess another lesson that we take into our new chapter is I don't rely on VC funding, at least be as close to the profitability line as possible, so that in case all these external factors happen, you have committed funding that doesn't come through, etc. These things, they will happen. That's the inevitable. The market will shift. It will go up. It will go down. So just be in a position where you can stay alive. At the end of the day, that's all that really matters. You can achieve all those bold dreams and stuff if you're not alive.
It's a good point. It reminds me a bit of what you also mentioned with the market will go up and down. What we've experienced is kind of like these waves of funding. And then like one year, everyone wants to suddenly fund every business. The next year, no one's there.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And then the year after that, everyone's back. And then the year after, suddenly they're all gone. Yes. It's a little bit like, the droughts that we experience in the country at Paris. 1 year the drought, suddenly the next 1 year was flood.
Crazy, right? Yeah, it's insane.
So I know, and I don't know whether you can talk about it, but I know there were some legal disputes also with other companies, which I think fell roughly into that time when things were slowly starting to crack.
Yeah.
And what effect did they have on the company? And then again, as this kind of added, now, again, the mind of Tesh, what was going on?
Yeah. So some of those things are really the hardest part because you design partnerships and, our society is very relationship driven. So social capital plays a big role in how far you can get, how far you can drive the business. And a lot of these partnerships, even with, guys offering us services, whether it's logistics or, financial services, were really relationships with friends, other founders, in the ecosystem, and you're all doing it in the good spirit. So to build your businesses. But it was really tough because I felt like I had let down my partners, or our business partners in this case, because now you've made commitments, you're running the business and money is coming in. You even have the paperwork, to show for it, but the money is not in the bank. So when the unfunded commitments didn't come through, then I was in a very tough situation as a CEO of the business because it's either you use all the money you have to pay the money remaining in the bank to pay the obligations you have or to keep the business a going concern. You can't do both at the same time. Even like you could try and balance the numbers, but it just doesn't work, right? And you still need to keep growing and inspire confidence in new funders to come into the business. So you're juggling all these balls. At the same time, you have to downsize the business. So it was the most stressful time of my life. In fact, like talking about it just feels really PTSD. Like we're still dealing with some of those ghosts on the walls. Because at the end of the day, you feel that you've disappointed a lot of people who believed in you, from partners to shareholders and all that. You still feel that, there's a part of this that is your fault, in the sense that, okay, yes, I had unfunded commitments or all that. But at the end of the day, I was running the business and I've made some calls. If I knew so, today, you can tell there's a lot that I do differently.
Okay. Which is good. Yeah. And important as well. Because, it shows that you're reflecting on everything that happened as well. Yeah. Now, we know that you had those funding challenges. One question from me, obviously, is how when those times got so tough, how did some of the other investors react?
Great question. I got mixed reactions. So I'll say there's, I guess, the 80-20 principle, sort of like, there's 80% of the investors who, for lack of a better word, like don't really matter, because it's not like in the sense of they don't come in to really push you to make decisions, or they don't complain, they don't applaud you when things are going on. They're just like quiet, they're just chill. Then there's like 10% who are super active. They'll be with you on a positive, in a positive way. They will be with you, and that doesn't mean they don't, bring out the whip sometimes, but like they do it for the best interest of both the company and the founder. So that's a rare investor to have, but they're the best investors. They're super supportive. And then there's always that 10% who somehow find their way into your cap table, but they're a nuisance. It's like they don't understand why they're in venture capital, maybe because they're hot and cold. They're happy when things are good, when things are not good. They're breathing down your neck, or they're blaming you. They're not saying the best things about you. So those are the kind of guys to avoid. But I mean, it is what it is. It's life. There's always, if you think about just how the world works, there's good, evil, and then there's everything in between. So
it's true. And we remember as well, actually, one of our conversations, I told you have to think carefully about who you're taking money from.
Yeah.
And that was in the very beginning.
Oh.
So I'm glad that you're thinking the same way now.
So yes, 100%.
Let me ask you, as a kind of final question on this before I ask you one last one. Okay, so not the final, the pre-final question.
Yeah.
What drove you in the end, and apart from obviously the burn and so on, to close down in many countries, but keep Uganda open? How did that then go?
Yeah.
And then what led to the company closing down in the end after all?
Yeah.
And again, your mind, was it hard? What did you truly feel in those moments?
Yeah, so I think mostly it was driven by hope that we could refocus all the little resources we had left into a market that was performing the best. In this case, it was Uganda, and try and make it work. So that's why we kept it open.
So holding on to dear life.
Holding, exactly. Like, okay, this is probably our best bet. We had a strategy, at least at board level, on how we could rebuild again, but starting in Uganda. Unfortunately, the fundamentals of the business still weren't optimal. And at some point, it now started feeling like we're just flogging a dead horse. So that's how we ended up shutting down the whole e-commerce business, with the idea of now thinking, like, just strategizing. That was mid last year. And both, from a company perspective and the founder perspective, thinking about what next, how do we handle this whole situation. And as I mentioned, there's still ghosts on the wall. So those are things we're dealing with now, because it's not a good situation, especially as a founder now. Think about the flip side of being visionary, selling these bold, ambitious plans to a group of people. You have employees who sacrifice, their time. They could be doing something else in different businesses and choose to back your mission, to back you. VCs would have used their money in other businesses as well. They choose to back you. So those are the kind of things that eventually, they're super hard to deal with on a day-to-day basis, just feeling like you've disappointed guys. But you have to pick yourself up and design a plan that can at least work for the majority of the people. You can't please everyone, but you try and do your best. So that's, I'd say, the phase we've been in over the last year.
It's also that you're feeling a bit disappointed with yourself. And obviously, I can imagine, because we all trying to build things, and like you're saying, sometimes things work out, sometimes they don't. When they don't, it always affects you in a way, because you look in the mirror and you're like, I wanted to have done this different. Better.
It's tough, and for many founders, it's much worse. I'm lucky that I've had the grit to push on and even launch something else that's going pretty well. But for many, you just can't. You lose the energy to even wake up and try again, because you feel like a failure. But in the real sense, you need to realize that you and the business are two different entities. The reality is the way our business operates is like, for example, knock on wood, if I died, somehow the business that I operate will find a way to live on. I will be replaced. So I could be the founder, but I'm sitting on this seat or in this office, and I could be replaced.
It's the hard reality. But if you set your business up like this, it's actually for the better for the business, right?
Exactly.
As harsh as it sounds. Because, like you're saying, there's so many employees who actually also, rely on it. So it's part of building a business to set it up that way.
Yes. And now with this, there's this effect of, businesses shutting down and, some thriving. But that's the usual cycle. And this cycle is hitting us very hard for the first time, if you think about just the VC ecosystem. And a lot of people don't know how to deal with it. So from VCs, you find PEs are turning into VCs, VCs turning into PEs. Like, it's just a mess, right? Because this thing is happening and people are a bit shook. Employees working in startups are experiencing this for the first time. It's like they didn't realize what it meant to work in a startup. What like ESOP allocations actually mean. It could mean that you become a millionaire. It could mean that you walk away with zero. So all these things are for the better in my view, because they're helping the ecosystem mature.
Yes, and we have to do things better.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you a tough question that's on my mind, because I asked you so much about your perception, your mind. Now, let me just give you a kind of an outside observation that I had myself. And that is because we spoke quite a lot in the beginning, and then we lost touch for a while because obviously you got busy running the business, growing the business, doing what other people told you had to do as well.
Yeah.
And when we first met, you used to take Ubers. Then I saw a BBC documentary, small one. You remember that one? You drove in a small BMW.
Yes.
And then the last time I saw you, before the past few months, obviously, you had a Land Cruiser. And I'm asking this question because you remember there was this conversation, I think, was it Bill Gates or somebody, or Steve Jobs, who said, when you go to the VCs, don't take the Porsche, right? You remember that?
Yeah.
So when you're just looking at that kind of observation, the question I have is, one, do you still have an Land Cruiser? Jokes aside, does this...
I wish, yeah.
But the real question now, actually, does this describe kind of the journey of building the company and the steps in a way?
Yeah.
And how would you reflect on this journey in the context of these cars and my outside observation?
Okay.
Kind of, is it that good kind of equivalent of the rise and fall of MarketForce? How do you kind of perceive my observation that I just now shared with you?
So I think I can correct you on one thing. When we met, I wasn't riding Ubers.
You like to worship.
Yeah. So I mean, like, I owned a car since I was in campus, right? Like, I'd say yes.
The defense, I didn't see the car.
Oh, but it's all right. The thing is, I get the question. So how I think about it, and the reason my conscience is super clear throughout this journey is, for example, at Series A, had the opportunity to take secondaries. At Seed, had the opportunity to take secondaries, take some money off the table. But I never did this because I really believed in what we were building. I'd be feeling terrible if we had taken money off the table and the business didn't work out. So what happens is, running off a business or startup is a really, really hard job. And we don't talk about this conversation on compensation enough. And I like that you brought it up, because I believe at every stage, a founder should be compensated at least well enough to have, it's not comfortable, but to be able to really focus on the business.
To not have a side hustle.
Yes, to not have a side hustle. Exactly. And the thing is, as you continue running the business, time moves. So I'm opposed to sacrificing everything for the business, because what happens with a startup is, because most startups fail. If the startup fails and, for example, you're sleeping in the office every single day and not earning a cent, Elon Musk talks about this, but he had sold a company for, hundreds of millions of dollars before he did that. So he had a safety net. That's the difference between startups in the West and here. Here, there's no safety net. So if I'm sacrificing everything for the business, it doesn't work out. My VCs in business, they'll walk. My employees will find other jobs, and you're left there figuring, okay, do I find another job? It's sort of fresh, and you start that journey again. So I just believe in fair compensation for the founder. And this is something that the founders and the VCs, as they inject money, they can agree upon. So just don't be on the side of suffering, but also don't be on the extravagant side of, raising $1 million and half of that money is going into founder compensation or management compensation. It just doesn't make sense.
Appreciate it. I like also that you shared with us that you didn't cash out something, and you have a good consciousness. I think that's important.
Yeah.
And I think you answered the question very well. Now
that's a hard question.
I know, that's why I told you. I'll be saying one tough question during this interview, but I think these are also we discussed before this interview, for those who obviously weren't listening in because we weren't recording it. Yeah. But, it's important to share these learnings. It's important to be open in order to make the ecosystem better over the long term. And so I appreciate your answer. Let's talk about the next chapter, because that's something that interests me as well.
Yeah.
And, you had that mindset, things were not working out so well, and then suddenly you decide now there's a new company. How did you go about starting that? As in, what made you want to start a new company in a way? Because like you're saying, you're kind of downbeaten in a way. You're not feeling so great about a lot of things, but now here you are embarking on another bootstrap again.
Yeah. So I think it's mainly just back to how do you move on from failure. So I had 3 options. I was really, really beaten down. So option 1 is just get depressed and, take years to recover. I have a friend who ran a really large business and it collapsed with Chase Bank, because a lot of that deposits as a fintech was sitting with Chase Bank. And he went into depression for quite a while. He's just getting his footing now. So that's one. It's sort of an option, and I thought about it. I was like, this can't be me, Then the second one is, I've seen many founders do this as well. Just chill, first of all, take maybe 3-6 months off. And then as you think about it, most of them end up either in VC or get a corporate job and get paid well. So I moved from earning peanuts in the startup to at least getting a nice job, because you're smart. I'm a smart guy. I think I'd have gotten a nice job. And then there's option 3, which I feel like is more aligned to my purpose. It's like, okay, if I've done this and one of my mentors told me this and I like to repeat it, is Tesh, if you can make magic once, you can probably make it again, unless you are lucky. I believe I wasn't lucky for the most part. So there is some luck, but for the most part, it was being resourceful that got us to where we were. And so the idea was then, okay, can I be resourceful again? Can I tap into the networks, the people I know, tap into all the experience and knowledge, and relaunch as a smarter founder? So that's the option I chose, because I just feel it's part of my destiny to build something that makes a dent on the continent. So how Chpter came about is interesting. So my co-founder and I have made quite a number of angel investments since we were bootstrapped pretty much since 2019. And in 2021, we had made an angel investment in Chpter, which was run by this guy who I didn't know at the time. I just met them and I loved the product. My co-founder loved the product as well. So we got an angel check and we kept advising. We just thought, okay, if there's anyone to back, we've met many founders in the country. In Kenya, at least many reach out, but we're like, if there's anyone to back in this country, it's these two guys. So we really we felt they were smart. They had a good understanding of the market. And if I was to put it in VC speak, like who could be the unicorn in this country, we felt, okay, these guys are the guys to back. So we became friends because of that. We shared a lot of values. And in 2023, as we're thinking now about the transition, we had the option to start afresh, build something totally new, or bring some of these ideas that we have for a new venture from our learnings into Chpter. So we had a conversation with the guys and we're like, we all agreed that we could build better, faster, bigger together. And one of our joint mentors actually helped us negotiate a very good sort of arrangement to come together and build this thing. So that's what it is now.
That's good to hear. So it was basically kind of God watched out over you in a way, and made you do that one angel investment, which now turned it to the next chapter.
Yeah.
So you've said a lot already on what you reflected, but what is the one thing you plan on really doing better with Chpter and the team?
Yeah. So one of the things we are working hard to do is be default alive. What do I mean by default alive? I mean, before we start aggressively expanding, just make sure the fundamentals of the business are really, really solid and we don't rely on external funding. So we will raise funding. We still dream of building a unicorn and are working towards building so I use the word unicorn just to refer to a really big business, a multi-billion-dollar business. And that's because it's not about the unicorn. People talk about camels and zebras and all these things. I feel like that's a globally respected standard for being top 0.1%, because I believe that's something that you can build from Kenya. So that's our mission. Yeah.
Let me ask you one last question, and that is because of the current time that we live in and the AI hype that we hear everywhere.
Yeah.
If you're looking at AI tools, what's your personal professional tool at the moment that you like using most? And when you're looking at the promise of AI, particularly focused on the continent, what do you believe AI can actually do for us in the next 5 years?
Okay. Yeah, I love to talk about this in the context of what we're building today and why we're building it.
If you can keep it brief.
Yeah, very brief. Is we think that over the last 20 years, commerce is it's been there since the beginning of time. People have traded, right? Yeah. But today, there is this concept of social media, which is very, very strong. People are trading on social media. And then AI is also coming up as the next wave of the next big thing. It's the next big thing. So that's what we're combining with Chpter, is how do we make commerce better online, on social media specifically. So how I think about AI now to answer that question is, you have a knowledge economy. Today, people make money out of the ideas. I feel like AI is the companion. So when people talk about will AI replace jobs, etc., I feel like AI will be best for people who can turn it into their best companion, whether you're a business or individual. And that's how I use AI. It's to enhance my ideas, to enhance my productivity, my efficiency. That's what we're doing with businesses. If you required 10 or 15 people to respond to customer inquiries, I mean, AI can be those people, can help you do that. So,
and you only have one overseer to make sure that everything is done well, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Point.
Yeah. And people can be those people. It's not about them now not having jobs. It's about us thinking as, okay, just thinkers should think about what other jobs can be done.
Being able to deliver more value.
Yes, what other value can be created in the world.
So thank you very much. These were my questions. Tesh, I'll try to do something very difficult that I dislike doing at the end of every interview as a summary of our talking points.
Okay.
Let me start with one thing you said in school. If at least you don't pay attention, then at least you look for like-minded complementary skill sets amongst your classmates, because it might be your future co-founder, right? Then, gain your experience and learn from it. Gigs for others can actually help you build your experience for yourself. Which can then also lead to demand-led product discovery, because when you're doing certain gigs, you can kind of get a sense for what people actually need. And bootstrapping builds confidence for yourself as well as for external people. But be very clear before joining an incubator why you're doing it and what you're doing it for. Don't just join any incubator.
Yeah.
So have clarity of purpose. Focus on your unit economics to build stability in your business, or as you just said at the end of that journey, what you're doing in the next chapter is be default alive before aggressive expansion. Proactivity can also save you, because by being proactive, you can make sure that you can steer the ship away from danger before you face it. Relationships are critical. As a founder, one should be comfortable enough, but compensation should be so high that you don't need a side hustle, but not so low that you're going to struggle. And let me rephrase that. After the journey, what you did in order to pick yourself back up is to retune and find your purpose again, to be resourceful, build upon that. But as a smarter founder this time, because you're still feeling that destiny and your purpose is to be a founder and you want to build something of great importance. Now, is there anything to add from your perspective, Tesh, or did I summarize that well?
Well summarized. Very well.
Wonderful. Then thanks a lot to you, Tesh, and thanks to everyone who's listening. You can find our presence on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook as Push Venture Capital. X or Twitter, as it was called before, as #PushYourAdvantage. And we'll be back again soon with another podcast on the African tech ecosystem, which is available on Spotify and Apple Music, AfriPods, and of course on YouTube.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Tesh.